Hello, I am Bob Dickinson of Innovice, and you are looking at H2OMap Sewer GIS Professional, which is our sewer design steady state EPS modeling package for sewer modeling. It's a map info product, and I'm going to show you basically every single dialog and window inside of H2OMap Sewer. So we start out in the beginning. We have File. Make a new file, you open a file, you can close it, save as. You can import info sewer. You can export to bitmap, metafile, etc. You can do print previews, print, and this is the latest ones. Under edit, or under create rather, you can insert a manhole. You can add a wet well, pipe, pump. So those are the main features of H2OMap Sewer and info sewer for that matter. Manhole, wet well, pipe, pump. And a manhole can be either a chamber node, a loading manhole, or an outfall. Under edit, you can select elements, move nodes, redraw links, go to the database tables, delete selections and domains. So database tables look like this, where you have a selection of hydraulic data, information data, geometry data, pump data, curve data, etc. And we'll talk more about how that's used later. So that's under edit, and we have selection sets and domains inside of all of our Innovice products. Under view, you can add in GIS layers. You can add in SDE layers. You can move all backgrounds, layer properties, so it's a pretty good GIS connection, and it actually has a GIS gateway in the product. And you can also label nodes or label links. Here's some other various things. Toolbars, you can turn on or off the toolbars. You can make name views and refresh map if you're doing mapping like I'm doing here. Under Exchange, we have an export manager, and the export manager sends either a CSV file or a shapefile or a MIF file for your manholes, wet wells, pipes, and pumps. And that's how you would use the export manager to move the model to another program. You also have an import manager, the same idea except the opposite. CSV file, shapefile, MIF file for the same four objects. And then we also have ODBC Exchange, where you could import Excel files, DBF files, and access databases into the program. So a lot of flexibility about importing and exporting the data. Also under Exchange, we have convert polyline. So if you bring in a CAD file, it'll convert that polyline to nodes and links. Scenario is really good inside of all of the Innovice products. It allows you to set up scenarios, say for the future, with different data sets. So a future can have a different data set than the past scenario. You can also graph the scenarios together. So a lot of features about scenarios, very cool aspect of it. And you can have different sets there. We also have a compare data scenario here. Under tools, you have Run Manager. Run Manager allows you to run a steady state design. You can do a design of existing or a new system. You can also do water quality, and also has storms. You can model unit hydrographs, RDII, etc. EPS is our standard EPS simulation, similar to InfoWater, where you can model the flows for a week or a day or a month. And the parameters, which we'll talk about later, are basically the advanced force main, flow attenuation, etc. So you can see all of that descriptions in the help file. Also under tools, you can do batch simulation. You can make a pipe profile for output, input. You can do queries, output report graphs, output units, change units. You can do domain. Facility is another cool feature of all the Innovice products, where you can basically make some data inactive. So you can make your model smaller for testing or for calibration, and then or for future compared to present. And you can do map selection, database queries, query sets, etc. So a lot of flexibility in all of our products. Animation viewer, pipeline costing. We can calculate inverts for the pipes. Pipe invert translator. And what that does is it moves the translation upstream or downstream. Okay, it also has non-circular links, so you don't have to use your circular pipes, but you would have to define what the type of section is in this dialog. Elevation profile, it can interpolate elevations from for DEMs. Calculate pipe length based on your data. It has an add-on manager, which is the load allocator. And then under tools, preferences, this is where you define important parameters, for example, what to show when things are inactive or in domain, how to transform the spatial index, various information about the project, operation information. Again, click on help to find that information. So if we click on content here, it comes up with the help file. Utilities, locate various elements, change the ID, allows you to change the ID of the manholes, wet wells, pumps, and pipes. Compute element type, there's certain rules. For example, a force main always is downstream of a chamber node, and a chamber node is downstream of a pump. The pump is always connected to a wet well, so this checks that data. Other things are verify links, direction. You can do trace upstream, trace downstream, so everything is sort of nicely designed here. Recall. If you make an input from a GIS, you can update the map for the database, etc. Window, you can turn off the overhead window there. You can turn off the status bar. There's that down here. Turn off the attribute browser. Turn off the control center. So let's turn the control center on again in the attribute browser. The attribute browser shows us data about the input and the output of the model. And it does it for node and links. The control center is where you define curves, database queries, query sets, patterns, etc. You can also do contours or annotation. Here's annotation. Here's contour. Here is default. Now, it's a little bit tricky in H2OMap sewer. So if I wanted to look at the output data, I can then do views based on the output data. Same thing for the link. But you need to change the view. So if you want to enter data, you have to go to input data or default data. And then we have the different layers. And here's where you would have things like, here's our intersection here. Go to GIS Exchange. Make it active and then go to GIS Exchange and it shows up here. So this is how GIS Gateway works, and then you can click on Exchange to bring it back and forth. Field mapping is where you define the field maps here. So this is all the dialogues for H2OMap sewer. Remaining things are the run manager. So if we run the manager here, also we have output report manager. So here's where we could do things like look at the EPS or steady state, manhole loading report. So let's do a gravity main report. Tells us what the total flow, unpeakable flow is, peakable flow, etc. We can do graphs. Click on graphs. We can go to EPS. Let's look at a group gravity main. model again and we look at the continuity error. And at the bottom, the continuity error is pretty good. So that gives us our total inflow, our total storm flow, or outflow, or flooding, initial wet well model, wet well storage, final wet well storage, and then if there's any remaining flow in the gravity mains. So now let's look at the graphs again and the output. And what you see there is velocity, depth, Froude number, d over d, overflow, adjusted depth, adjusted velocity, q. And if you wanted to have a higher definition for the report, come over here, and our report was only 1 hour. So let's change that to 5 minutes. Run it again. That doesn't affect the continuity error, it just affects what's on the graph. So now we refresh all. We're also on the toolbars. So under toolbars again, you have edit toolbar, zoom, domain, facility, active output, and standard. So you can also use things like change the output preferences, change the output units, make a hot link, etc. So this is a little bit about the main dialogues of H2OMap Sewer. You can also find this in the Info's H2OMap Sewer help file. Thank you for listening. This has been Bob Dickinson of Innovice.